South Bend, Indiana. I'm here with my friend Pete Buttigieg, who's the mayor here, one of the youngest mayors in America. So I've been going around to different states for my personal challenge for the year to see how different communities are working across the country, seeing how people are living and how they're thinking about their work and their hopes and challenges. And it's been really interesting so far. I just got into Indiana, and South Bend is my first stop. So we're just driving around here, and I figured that this would be a pretty fun time to go live. Now, before we get into anything, Pete's going to give us a bit of a tour of the city here. Pete, do you want to just give a bit about your background and how you got into being the mayor here? And you have a pretty amazing story.
Sure. I don't know about amazing, but...
no, you have an amazing story.
So I grew up here in South Bend. In fact, we're a few blocks from my boyhood home now. We're on the northwest side of the city. And this is a city that, when I was growing up, was really struggling to figure out how it was going to develop when it stopped being auto town. So we were the headquarters of Studebaker, which you don't see a lot of right now, but in its day, until the last Studebaker was made in 1963, Studebaker was one of the biggest car companies in the world. And before the big three, you had kind of a big four.
I have a question. I don't want to interrupt you, but yeah. Can people on the live hear? Because I don't know if we don't have like some advanced setup here. We're just actually using my phone, so I want to make sure that can everyone hear Pete when he's talking? Well, continue, and they will now tell us if we need to talk louder.
I'll just try to speak up. So, this was an industrial town. We're on the map because of the University of Notre Dame. That's why I'm here. My parents teach at Notre Dame. They moved here just before I was born in the 80s. But it was a city that was really kind of on the ropes. And one of the things I want to show you is some of the neighborhoods and the work we've been doing to bring them back. Because the city contracted, lost about a quarter of our population over the course of the 60s and 70s. So I'm going to take us through a couple of neighborhoods here. And then we'll wind up going to actually one of the sites where the Studebaker factory stood. My story is, I grew up here, and kind of like everybody else at the time, I kind of thought that success meant getting out of South Bend. So that's what I did. I went to Harvard, went to the UK for further study after that, and that was when I realized it actually really mattered a lot to me that I was from somewhere.
By further study, you mean you were a Rhodes Scholar?
Yeah. So
a very, very humble guy.
And it was a great time. I loved that. But I began to realize that actually this was home. Like, it meant something to be from a place like South Bend. And actually, I started identifying almost militantly with being from the industrial Midwest. Once I realized what it meant. But growing up, like we're about to pass on your right here. I don't know if it's possible for viewers to see it, but these are the remnants of what was once one of North America's top 10 breweries. You can see the smokestack on the left-hand side. That's all that's left. But this stood as this kind of hulking, empty brewery. You can see the bricks. We just completed the demolition on everything but the smokestack. And this kind of haunted my neighborhood. And structures like this haunted all of our neighborhoods, especially on the west side, growing up. But that's part of what makes the place so interesting, because now you have this revival going on, even in a smaller, what some would call Rust Belt community in the middle of the country. People really believe in it. And, we're embracing this project of turning our city around. So about 6 years ago, I ran for mayor with a lot of friends from my generation helping out on the campaign, but also a lot of support from seniors who love the idea of a young, educated person really wanting to make a difference here. I'm going to take us through a couple of neighborhoods here just because I want you to see what we were up against in terms of vacant and abandoned houses. When I took office, we had about 1,300. So we set up a challenge to deal with 1,000 houses in 1,000 days. And now it's a lot better. You'll still see a few when I take us up some of these streets.
Let's see. Turn this around so that you all watching on live can see this as well.
So we turn right
what
on
we're seeing.
Johnson Street. You'll notice a couple of things. Obviously, the houses here are pretty modest, but there's a mix. Some of them are really well kept. The joke is that you'll see the grandma out with the nail clippers clipping the grass so that it would be just so. Others are in pretty tough shape, and it's really block by block that you're fighting to keep these neighborhoods in good shape. But what you'll also see is some vacant lots, and those are there because we had a collapsing house that needed to be dealt with. That we really didn't want to allow it to deteriorate any further. It was controversial because it cost a lot of money to demolish the houses, but we think the neighbors are better off because they're not coping with the effects of these properties. Here's one. I think this might be one on the right-hand side. They're on the left.
Okay.
There probably used to be a house.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can see the stairway still going up to it, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, I hope there will be a house there again, but we're being realistic about the fact that could be 10, maybe 20 years before that happens.
Interesting. So, what have you seen in terms of? Let's get to industry in a bit, because I know you've done a lot of work on revitalizing and helping to bring new industry in. One thing that I think is really interesting as I travel around is meeting with young folks who are going into leadership. So we were at Harvard at the same time, but there are folks. I mean, I was just in Detroit and Dearborn at the Ford factory and at U Michigan Dearborn, and I met this young guy, Jewel Jones, who he's 21 years old, and he's the youngest elected state representative in the country, and he ran for office. It's a full-time job in Michigan, but he did it while he was graduating from U Michigan at Dearborn. Awesome. It's a super inspiring story. Meeting him and his friend who's his chief of staff, who's still a junior in college, who's finishing up, and his crew. I mean, you get the feeling that it's like, all right, this is kind of what we want to have a new generation in leadership. What do you think we need to do to get more folks like you to run for to mayor and state legislature and all these different positions to make it so that the values of this generation can get reflected in policies?
Well, the good news is I think more people are motivated to do that than before, and I think there's a moment that everybody goes through when you begin to realize that when you think about why doesn't somebody do something about a given problem, and you're always uttering sentences that begin with the words why don't they, right? You begin to realize there's a chance to actually turn that over and say, why don't I? Why don't we? And just take control of it. The more time you spend, I think, wrangling with these problems in the real world, the more you realize, the people who run the world are just people. They may be more experienced or more educated or older, but you don't need some magical touch to be in leadership. You just need to care, and you need to be willing to get involved. And what's exciting to me now is I think a lot of the same caliber of talent that used to go to places like Wall Street or Silicon Valley even. A lot of those same people are now drawn to cities or to communities and to the work of revitalizing them because you can tell how important it is. A friend of mine put it in a funny way. He just said, in this country, you got to be from somewhere. And the point is, I think we're coming to terms, just as a society, a little more with our relationship to the places that shape us, and I think that's a very healthy thing. So I'm going to try to take us a little bit south, just to see a couple more neighborhoods that have had some impacts I want to discuss, and then we'll make our way to a great neighborhood center with a coffee shop that I'm a big fan of. People hearing me okay, by the way?
Yeah, no, I got some comments after I said that our audio is good. Do you want to talk about some of the industry that you've worked to bring in? I mean, this is an amazing city with a long history, with what was it, 4 or 5 decades ago, the big Studebaker factory, right?
Yeah.
And since then, the big one of the big growth questions is how do you develop a strategy for using the resources that the city has to bring in new industries that are more forward-looking and that are going to provide more jobs for folks. So, I watched a TED Talk that you gave on this a while ago, and we've had a few conversations about this, but I think it would be really interesting to talk a bit about how you're thinking about this and how the plan is going so far.
Yeah, to me, the way I really think about it is seeing what you've already got and seeing the value in it in new ways. So, a community like ours has an older infrastructure, older physical plant, a lot of older traditions, and and we're trying to make sure they're relevant in a new world and a new economy. And there's a lot of ways to do that. One of them has to do with the fact that we've got data centers emerging on some of the acreage that used to be given over to Studebaker factories because they have a lot of power. There were these power substations that were built to power the factories that now actually have nothing left to power. And somebody realized that between that and the fact that a lot of fiber optic cable follows the old railway and highway right-of-ways, plus the fact we got pretty cold weather and data centers are expensive to cool off, they didn't realize we're actually a really good place for data centers. So there are things like that where you've got to make a bit of a move, which is to imagine what's in front of you in new ways. But the more I looked at that, the more I realized you have that all around the community, from very kind of small scale versions of it. Like we got one guy who has what he calls a piano adoption service. He'll intercept a piano that when he hears about a church or an estate sale, a piano that might be destined for the landfill, and intervenes and makes sure that he gets a hold of it, even if it's unplayable. And then he starts fixing it. And then he puts it in a new home. So he doesn't even sell the piano, he just asks to be paid to fix it up. So everything from pianos to million square foot factories, like one I'd like to show you later this afternoon. We're kind of reimagining what we've got based on new sources of value.
So what do you need to do as mayor to help get companies and to get that data center, those businesses here and built out? So
mayors in the last few years have got a lot smarter about how we do economic development. We used to do a ton of what you call smokestack chasing. So basically, you hear a factory might be looking for a location, you come up with the most aggressive possible incentive in order to basically buy those jobs. And the problem, of course, is that the employers you draw that way aren't that sticky if they're very responsive to incentives, and that means somebody else might pick them off in a few years. So, we still do incentives sometimes to make sure that the business case adds up for people to grow here. But what we've really realized is the importance of quality of place. And the reason that matters so much is that, employers are made of people, and they want to know that their people are going to be okay. They want to know that people are going to want to sometimes move to take the jobs that these companies offer. And so you want to make sure there's a sense that this is the kind of community you want to be part of. And so we kind of come full circle in a way. Because the only way to really attract people is to create the kind of places people want to be. So that means as a mayor, I'm also responsible for making sure that our neighborhoods feel good, making sure we've got a big effort downtown right now just to make downtown feel like a downtown again.
Yeah.
And you're really trying to empower the neighborhood advocates, the people in the arts, who are doing this on their own. I mean, it's not like I'm going to figure it out from City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to make sure when we discover things like that we're very supportive of them. And we try to tear down barriers for people who are trying to do things in new ways that make this the kind of place somebody would want to live.
Yeah. So one of the things, I was in Dayton, Ohio this morning, and I was sitting with a bunch of folks who are recovering opioid addicts, or heroin addicts, and a bunch of folks in the community who are working to help them recover. And that's a huge epidemic issue.
Yep.
Across the whole country, but especially here in some parts of the Midwest and New England. And it's actually, the stats are really staggering. I mean, more people are dying now per year than were dying from AIDS at the height of the HIV epidemic. More people are dying from opioid overdoses today than die from gun violence or car accidents.
Right.
So, since this is such a big issue, I'm sure you see some of this here, and as mayor, part of your job is to help deal with that as best as you can. What are the things that you're seeing that work, and what do you think needs to happen, and what can other cities maybe learn from what you're doing here?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. It's intense, it's difficult, and it's emotional for a lot of us because this is a community that's really affected by this. Almost everybody knows somebody whose family has been impacted. It's one of those cases as a mayor where you realize that the official tools that are in your hands, like just the mechanics of city government, are not enough. So what we've done is we've started looking for ways that we can partner with other players in the community. For example, our clinical players, right? We got hospitals and doctors' offices here.
Pulling up to the coffee shop.
Yeah, we'll be getting out in a second. I'm excited to show you this coffee shop. But just to finish the thought, making sure that our physicians when they're deciding what to prescribe for pain, right, are conscious of the fact that often prescriptions lead to dependency. Connecting that up with law enforcement, we've made sure that our officers have these kits that allow them to intervene on the site.
Narcan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Narcan, naloxone. But it's a classic example of one of those issues where there's no one piece of the puzzle that's going to be enough. And so when you're mayor, you really think about your informal authority, your convening power, just as much as you do any of the actual kind of policy tools that are at your disposal, so that you can really make a difference.
Awesome. All right. So do you? So I mean, that's a big issue. So I mean, obviously there's a lot more to do there. Yeah. So you wanted to head into the coffee shop, and then we're going to drive around more after that.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So I guess we'll probably wrap up the live though.
Okay.
Unless you want to bring that into the coffee shop, what do you want to do?
We could if you got somebody ready to hold it. It's a pretty cool place. I'll just describe it. Maybe people can vote on what they want to do. It's called the Local Cup, and again, as you've seen, we're in the middle of a relatively challenged area, but one that has a lot of people who believe in it. And so, in the middle of this neighborhood center, some people decided to start a coffee shop. They're on a pay-it-forward model, so you decide what you're going to pay. But the real point, like any great coffee shop, isn't the coffee, although the coffee's pretty good.
Community.
It's having a node where people can come together, and that's what cities do best, right? Is they bring different kinds of people together. So it's a pretty good scene.
All right. Well, I mean, we could bring it in. I mean, what do you all think?
You seeing some thumbs up there?
Yeah, I mean,
right. Let's do it.
All right. There. All right. Do you want to hold it?
Sure.
All right.
Let's see. Not quite as savvy on this tool as you are, so actually, hold on, let me grab some out of the car real quick.
All right. Well, we're heading into the coffee shop. We're going to resume the conversation there. Are there things that that folks who are watching this on the live want us to cover, or wondering about South Bend or the trip around the country so far? It's now going to take a few seconds for people to. Hey. All right.
We get there?
Oh yeah, this will work. Hey, how's it going? Hey. Actually, this is gonna be better. Well, it's probably better to just talk to the people here.
Okay.
All right. We're gonna wrap up, and I'm gonna go talk to some of the local folks who are here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Looking forward to the rest of the day here in South Bend, and I'll report back afterwards on what I've learned. All right. Awesome. See you guys.